Hello, everyone. I'm really excited to be here and really excited to speak to you all about performance, which has come up quite a bit today, and it's exciting to be with a bunch of other people who are excited about performance. And specifically, what I want to talk to you all about is how I got interested in web performance, and specifically how I've gone about trying to answer almost impossible questions to answer, like, is the site fast yet? And maybe together we can get an answer for that. And so it all started when I started working at my current company that I work at now. Just had my 3-year anniversary there, which is really exciting. Got a little balloon. And we're based in New York City, and we're called Teachers Pay Teachers, or TPT for short. And we're an educational community and marketplace where teachers have stores on our site where they can share and sell resources that they create to other teachers. And I was really excited to start working at TPT as a software engineer. My mom's a teacher. When I told her I was interviewing there, she was like, I use it all the time. And I was really excited to work on a product where I felt like I could use my tech skills to make a real impact in people's lives, especially for teachers who work so hard. This is a picture of Team TPT. I think a little bit after I joined, we've grown quite a bit since then. And this is a very posed picture of me and a teammate on the team I worked on, but I really loved how collaborative it was. And I started out as a product engineer on the search and discovery team. And so on TPT, I think now we have over 4 million resources on our site. So part of the objective of our team was to figure out how do we deliver the right resource at the right time to the right teacher. And I specifically was working mostly as a front-end engineer, and this is my second engineering job, so I was really excited to dig into owning a bigger project. This is what the site looked like when I joined in 2016, which was interesting, and I was really excited to work on a new project to bring it into modern day design, but we didn't want to change too much about how it actually functioned. This was for a few reasons. We first wanted to take an approach of moving it to a completely different stack as well, that they had decided on, I think finalized like the week I got there. I thought I was going to be working on a PHP monolith legacy site, and ended up we were going to rebuild something where I'd be working on Node app that called out to an Elixir Graph API, which is really exciting, and working with React. So my first project was working on the front end of that with my teammates to rebuild this. And in addition to learning about our new tech stack, it involved figuring out what are all the different pieces of this page. And not only the visual pieces you see, but how does filtering work? What tracking do we have on the page, and how do we want to rebuild all of that? And so I felt really good about where we were after working super collaboratively with the team. This is what it looks like now, spoiler alert, that we launched it. But before we launched, there was a problem. I thought we were all feature ready to go, but it turns out that even though the legacy code base was a little difficult for developers to work in, it was very fast. And it turns out the new search page we had built was much slower, and that was a launch blocker. So you can imagine I was a little nervous about this, didn't really know what to do, but knew we had to work collaboratively. So one thing I really love about the structure of our engineering team is that we have product engineers, but then we also have platform engineers. So like I said, I was working on a search and discovery product team. Product engineers are working on a specific part of the site, but then we have platform engineers. And so I worked with our web platform team to figure out how can we update our tech stack and look into this problem so that we would be unblocked for launch. And it turns out that this was so impactful to me that I actually ended up switching to that team because I really enjoyed those problems, and am now the tech lead and manager for that team, which is very exciting. And so we answer a lot of questions generally about front-end things at TPT, but today I'm going to be talking about some ambiguous questions that can be hard to answer that we get specifically about performance. So imagine you have an anxious engineer like me back when I was trying to help my team launch the page, and they come to you and they say, we're really trying to launch a new feature, but it's too slow. What should we do? I definitely want to help out this anxious engineer. Let's see what we can do. Or you might have a frustrated user. Maybe this is somebody who wrote into our customer experience team saying something to the effect of, the homepage seems slower than usual. Is something wrong? If you've ever been on the other side of trying to answer these questions, you can be like, that's not enough information, I have no idea. But we also want to help them out as well. You can also imagine that once you tell people you're working on something like web performance, things that might come up in the kitchen or in various meetings might be, so you're working on web performance, like is the site fast yet? Which is also a really hard question to answer, but I didn't realize until I was the person being asked these questions. Also, as I started to work on web performance with my team, we had to think about, hey, we're doing all this work, like what are we actually trying to gain and where are we trying to go? So I want to get some answers for all of our various users, and I really love mysteries. And before I was a software engineer, I did a lot of scientific research, so I love these like ambiguous, hard to solve problems. And my favorite way of getting closer to solving a really hard question is to ask some follow-up questions. So for this talk, I want us to put our detective hats on and to ask 5 follow-up questions that can get you closer to an answer about how we can learn more about the performance of our current site and what it means for whatever you're working on, and also how this has to do a lot with communication and with really being aligned with different stakeholders in whatever you're building. So we'll go through first, why do we care? What does fast even mean? I've been using that term a lot. How do we measure performance? How fast is fast enough? And then, if we're feeling good, how do we make sure it stays fast? So let's dive in. Let's hopefully, by the time we finish these questions, we can have some answers for our anxious engineer and our frustrated user. So the first one is, why do we even care if the site is fast? And I'll first mention that maybe we don't, and that's a valid answer, but I think even taking time to think about that is a step in the right direction. At TPT, we don't have a specific performance team. Like my team has that in addition to a bunch of other things to work on, so it can be really hard to figure out when to prioritize performance. And imagine if you have smaller teams, it's even harder. And there can be use cases where you have to make trade-offs. I think there are some use cases where maybe you're experimenting with something. You just want to kind of see what it looks like. You're going to throw out the code or something, and you don't want to worry about performance, but at least you made an explicit decision. Or maybe you're prototyping something, and again, it doesn't really make sense for your specific use case. Though I will say, I would caution against thinking that any experimentation, you shouldn't think about performance in the beginning, because it's much easier to think about it and have a baseline for thinking about performance when you're getting started rather than going back at the end. So I always warn people about this, but did want to call that out. But let's say in almost all cases, you are concerned about performance. And so what's been really helpful for us is to think about how does performance affect our users. Like I said, TPT is a site for educators, and everyone is really on board with our mission, which is why I love working there, of empowering educators to teach at their best. So when we talk about performance, I like to get everyone bought in by figuring out like how can we align that really critically to our mission. So if the website's slower, you can imagine that will cause a lot of stress or frustration for teachers who already have a really stressful job. And I definitely don't want to do that, and that's definitely not supporting our mission. Also, like I mentioned, my team's mission was to find the teachers the right resource at the right time. And if we are making a fast website, that's literally saving teachers time. And so this is a really powerful way to get people bought into why we should even think about web performance. So I would encourage you to think about how you might do that for whatever product you're working on or whatever tech you're working on as well. Okay, so we figured out that we care about performance, but what does fast even mean? This was really hard to explain to people who kind of wanted like a yes or no answer when they asked me about site performance, or like, give me a number like in seconds. And I was like, it's not possible, but I can get you some various answers. But I think first it's important to align on what we actually want to measure together. And again, I don't think this should just be the job of engineers or people who are engineers working on performance. I think this is really collaborative. It could be with other people in marketing or also in product, various designers. I worked with a lot of people on aligning on what these metrics are like. And this involved identifying key metrics that for our organization made sense. We decided it was important for us to look at metrics that are like industry standards as well, of speed index, so we could understand the average time things were displaying on our page, time to first byte. We wanted to get measurements on also responses from the API calls that were being called on the page so that we could have an understanding of what was contributing to our timings across various pages. Also identifying what those key pages are. The search page is one page, but depending on what your search query is, what your filtering is, it can be an infinite amount of pages. So how do you test that and what metrics are important for you? This was an ongoing conversation. And what was really helpful was the communication aspect of this. So there's lots of documentation out there that we would link, and it was awesome, and sometimes that was enough to send to other engineers. But maybe it's more impactful to show a designer or a product person the film strips and of your site loading and how that actually will appear to the user depending on what device you're on or different connectivity or speeds. And so I think aligning your metrics to actually what other people might care about was actually very critical. As well as, since we talked about why you got everyone bought in on performance, let's go ahead and also connect those metrics to that. So for example, for the search page, we know we really want teachers to be able to interact with the page. It's probably important that we keep track of a metric like time to interactive. So this was a really good example to get all aligned on what fast means. And even though I couldn't give like a one-word answer, this was really a great way to get all on the same page. Okay, we have our foundation, so like really, how fast is the site? Let's get some more concrete answers. And the way we've gone about this is by conducting performance audits. So I'll use the example of the search page report again. We've done a few of those. Moving over to our new stack, which has been really exciting. And performance audits have been a way for us all to get aligned and work on it collaboratively. And we've used various toolings that we've decided to use at TPT to get like a whole overview picture of what we want to measure. So we've used tools like Lighthouse, we've used tools like SpeedCurve that bring in data from web page test and Lighthouse also, but also make great graphs that we can show to people outside of engineering that are clear. We've also used a tool called Catchpoint where we can run synthetic monitoring tests across various nodes throughout the world. And all of these have given us a better picture of what the current page or feature that we're trying to work on is like right now, and then also help us figure out, like, as we make our changes, can we test that as well and compare them? And then that can give us a better understanding of where we're trying to go. And what I really learned from doing this exercise, speaking of testing on multiple browsers, this was really important for performance and also for us to take into account like what type of browsers teachers might use and who use our website. Are they on their school Wi-Fi? What types of devices are they using? They probably are not using the same types of devices that have the same power as we do. So it's really important to test in different ways. And so we used a lot of synthetic testing for this as well. And also it helped us make decisions. For example, when we were doing a homepage port, we decided to launch and work incrementally. So we first launched a logged out homepage that we felt good about on desktop, but knew we still needed to do work on performance for mobile. And doing a performance audit really helped us think about those trade-offs. And I mentioned Catchpoint, but that's been a really cool tool for us for availability and performance monitoring, because we're able to see run synthetic tests from different nodes across the world. So TPT is used, I think, by the new number, 70% of teachers have downloaded a resource from us in the US, but we also have users who use us outside of the US, and it's important for us to understand what their performance experience is like as well. So this was something we wanted to do as well in our performance audits, and that helped us get a good sense of how fast is the site. But, so you've done this work, we've collected some metrics, and from those metrics, then you've taken the steps to figure out what you might want to try. Maybe you realize, okay, we're loading too large images. Let's work on that. Or we want to load less fonts on mobile. Let's try that and see how that affects metrics. Or somebody else go and figure out what we can lazy load in. So while everyone's working on that, I would suggest the first step is just aligning on what are you working towards? So how fast is fast enough? You could kind of work on performance forever. So again, I'm really into collaboration. I think this is really important to work with product on to define success. My team can help inform that, but we don't know specifically about each product's need and their roadmaps, so we like to work collaboratively with them to figure out what are you trying to optimize for and how can we help you get the right information to do that. And then also, as we make changes, we want to get you unblocked as soon as possible so you can start meeting your goals. So how can we do that? Something I really encourage is A/B testing performance changes. I like this for several reasons. I just love testing, maybe also from my science background. But it gives you a better sense of, are the changes you're making actually doing what you think they want to do? And this is also a great way to tie other user metrics you might care about to performance changes. And having this historical data makes it way easier to advocate for making performance changes in the future. So you can say, hey, remember that test we ran where we made really improved the speed index and it also changed maybe the click-through rate? Then you can say, let's take time to do that again, if that's going to help your users and help impact the metrics that you care about. Also, you can set some benchmarks. So this can be against comparable pages. So for example, for that search page, we were saying, the old site's pretty good. We felt good about the speed. Let's say we're aiming for that. Or you can look at a competitor and say, okay, maybe we want to be as fast as this other e-commerce site. Let's look at some metrics there that's comparable. Or maybe it's dependent on your tech stack. Maybe you have different expectations for mobile and desktop, so setting these benchmarks ahead of time will make it feel like you're actually working towards a goal as you make all of these performance changes, which is really important. So, last question. Maybe you've done this, you made all of your changes, you're feeling good, you feel like you have more information on performance. So how do we make sure that it stays fast? I've seen that one code change can take all the hard work you've done and completely degrade the performance. So how do we make sure that that doesn't happen? And I would really encourage all of you to think of performance as a product requirement. That would have helped me a lot and saved a lot of stress if we had thought about that as critically as other product requirements of porting over the search page. And this is a lesson I definitely took to heart, and I think it's just important. I like to think of performance as something that we can help other teams learn more about. So my team likes to think about what tooling can we have in place to help others make informed decisions. So it doesn't have to just be tooling. We've taken time to take all of these performance audits, and something that we've done is making sure that we are very clear on what audience they're for. Usually it's for quite a few different audiences, so something that's been really helpful is we put all the details at the bottom for what somebody might want to look at, and at the top, put a summary. Also, like I said, those definitions to all of the metrics is really helpful. But some other tooling we have in place is our first step was saying, how can we let engineers know if their product if their deploy or change made something slower? Then, even better than that, how can we make sure maybe in their PR they get some information about how their changes might affect performance? We've done this by showing people how their change affects the size of the JavaScript that we'll be sending. Or even better, how can we help people think locally as they start making changes about how what they're doing will affect performance later on? And all of this tooling we want to put in place just to make it as easy as possible to not degrade. And like I said, I think this is all about making balanced trade-offs. There's so many things we want to do to work on performance at my company, and we don't have as much time. And sometimes it can feel like when you add monitoring that you just introduce a whole new set of problems that you didn't know existed before, and you kind of wish you could go back to and you didn't know about them. But like I said, I like mysteries, and I've found it actually really great that we now know these things that are probably affecting users that we didn't know about before, and now we can take action, even if it's small action or small steps to making it better. And every time we do that, we are supporting our mission of helping educators. And so like I said, something that's been helpful has been like, how can we automate this process as much as possible? Something my team does from Catchpoint, you're able to send like a report of the last week of data and also of the last 4 weeks of data. While some changes are like abundantly clear that it's gotten slower after one deploy, we've also seen performance changes that get slowly worse over time. And so someone doesn't notice until like 2 weeks of looking at like 4 weeks of data, and then we can dig into it. So having these reports automated and sent to us in email or Slack when we stop looking at our emails has been a great way for us to be more aware of keeping our site fast and also high quality. Okay, so we've made it through all of the questions. You can take our detective hat off, and let's see if we can help Anxious Engineer by going through some of these questions with them. So as a reminder, they're trying to launch a new feature, but it's too slow. What should they do? So let's think about, why do we care about performance in this case? So in this case, we want to deliver an equal or better user experience than teachers are already finding resources with success on our site. We don't want switching to a new stack to affect that in any way negatively. Okay, so we're aligned on that. Now let's align on, what does fast even mean? I mentioned before, we had some metrics that we knew were important to us. Speed index, time to interactive, our time to first byte, and different responses, and also measuring our different API response times. Cool, so we're also aligned on that. We then did a performance audit to figure out where the old page was really good and where we were currently with our new product that we wanted to launch. And then we were able to look into what changes could we make. And that was a lot of brainstorming and figuring out, using a lot of the speed tooling that I think we'll hear about, to figure out what changes we could make. But we also aligned on, from the beginning, where we were trying to go. So we knew we wanted it to be, okay, we'll feel good about launching when it's just as fast as the old one, or comparable. And we got to that place after a lot of work, which is awesome. And then we were able to launch. And then we did our fifth step of making sure we had monitoring and the performance of the page for later, so that we could keep track of this and not have to do a full audit like this in the future of this specific use case. So going through all of that, while it wasn't, again, just an easy answer, we helped Anxious Engineer feel okay and feel really supported, which is always really great and one of my favorite parts of my job. All right, let's see if we can also help frustrated user. When they say the homepage seems slower than usual, is something wrong? So we care about this because if our users are frustrated, That's not helping us with what we want to do. Also, let's think about seems slower than usual. So it seems like it felt okay before, but is there a timeline when this happened? Is this the only user complaining about this, or are other people, can we reproduce? Does it also seem slow? Do we have monitoring in place that shows anything around the different metrics that we think are important? What about the page seems slow? Are images not loading in? Are you not seeing certain content, or does no content not show up at all for a while? So getting more information about that can help us dig into where we might want to make changes. And if it turns out that the homepage is slower, let's agree to figure out like how many changes we want to make, and we can allocate resources to that. Because, like I said, if performance is a product requirement, it should be way easier to prioritize. Then let's say something was wrong and you're able to fix it. That's really great for your user, and also the monitoring you had in place hopefully helped you get an answer very quickly. And now this user can go back to teaching and getting all of the resources that they wanted. So we also helped them. So we still have this large question of, is the site fast yet? And I'm sorry to say that I do not have a clear answer to this, as you might have been able to tell from the rest of this talk, but I will say that I felt way better about being able to tackle different web performance challenges just by going through this and by thinking really incrementally, and by also just starting from a place of understanding and collaboration and working together, and not just thinking that this is just an engineering problem. And so I like to think about these 5 steps we went through, because we do have some answers. We now know why we care about performance for whatever we're working on. We have a shared understanding of what fast means. We have ideas of ways to measure performance. We have also a shared understanding of how fast is fast enough and where we're trying to go. And we have some plans for how to stay fast. And so I hope that if you've ever felt intimidated by a big question like this, or not known where to start with web performance, or felt like you didn't have the time, this will give you some inspiration to getting a little closer into digging into that. Thank you so much.